Hello and welcome. It's Locking Horns and it's me, Split. I'm back, and tonight we have an interesting discussion. Something that was asked of me to take care of was to give my viewpoint, our viewpoint collectively, on what is heathenry. So I asked Jeff to come back on tonight and sit down with me and discuss, that specific topic. And along with my brother Ty, he came along this evening as well, and we're just gonna jump right into that. But first, skål.
Skål. Yes.
Your thoughts? What is heathenry?
Well, heathenry is a term that's come to be applied to a way of life. I've never considered the path of the Old Norse gods to be a religion. There is a practice that is a religion. In today's world, it's called asatru, and it is a practice of the belief in the Old Norse gods. Heathen is a way of life.
Yeah. It's
a viewpoint. The old gods are a part of that viewpoint. You can't be heathen without honoring the old gods. If you honor a Christian God, if you honor a Muslim God, if you honor a Jewish God, if you honor the gods of the Hindi, if you honor the gods of any people of any time at any land, you're going to find people, human beings, that are heathen in the way that they live their life.
Okay.
They follow the heathen way. It is a way of life. It's how you live your life, and we'll get to that as far as definitions and examples. But it's how you live your life that makes you a heathen man or woman.
Right.
It's not saying I am.
Right.
I have to prove it. I have to be it. It has to be who I am. It's how I see the world, how everything that happens to me is in the context of being a heathen man. I don't see it any other way. I've always seen it from that perspective. I just didn't know heathen was the right way to describe it, because the Old Norse gods were not real to me as entities, because I was brought up a Catholic. I was brought up in a history of a Catholic home and family going back hundreds of years. So it was very much ingrained in who we were as human beings. So religion is the way of honoring your gods. It's the practice of honoring your gods. It's not your way of life, although you may associate yourself with a way of life that has been described or defined by that belief. And there's, in every religion, there's wisdom. In our religion, there's wisdom in our understanding of the things that are important to us, that guide us, that give us inspiration. We have our own words of wisdom. We have our own origin myth. We have our own ending myth. We have all of that. That's us. It belongs to us. It's from our ancestors to us. Being heathen is associated with an understanding that you are from someone. You are from someone. You have ancestors that followed this path. You have ancestors that honored the old gods in the way that we are honoring the gods today. You can't be heathen by definition without having the old gods in your life. Do you have to spend all your time with the gods? Do you have to bow down and worship them? Do you have to have an absolute day of the week that you have to go to their temple? No, that's not heathen. If you're going to honor the gods in a specific way, there are ways to create formulas where you can honor the gods. It's about honoring the gods, not worshiping the gods, honoring the gods. The gods honor us, they gift us, in return we honor them. Gift for a gift. This is a concept of heathenry. But for us, it has always been the way of living a life. The way, spiritually, is associated with all religions. All religions are part of the concept of the way. How do you acquire ultimate spirituality?
That's the way.
The way.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Everyone has their way. Every people have their way. Every people of any historical significance that we know of had a way. And whether it be the belief of the gods of the Mesopotamians, if it believe of the gods of the Mesoamericans,
the Greek or the Romans,
the Greeks, all of those gods have a similarity to them. All of them start with an initial and innate concept of the balance of chaos and order. Heathen folk live with chaos and order. We understand chaos and order intimately. It is in all of our stories. It's described in every one of our histories, in every one of our family histories, in every word of all of the wisdom that's been passed down to us, of all of the stories of the gods and the heroes. We have this concept of chaos and order. Yeah. And how do we as human beings stand between chaos and order in this balance point?
Yeah.
Because we're not always on the side of chaos. We're not always on the side of balance. Human beings have the opportunity, the right, the power to choose one or the other, as do our gods.
It's a thin line of hair. I mean,
it's
hard to you can't even really justify dictatorship in that, because if that means you got to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah, you are 100%. Your own dictator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have ultimate power, you do.
Yeah.
You decide your life. Circumstances will change the way you make decisions, perhaps, maybe. Some people, maybe not. But being a heathen, both of you are brothers to me, but both of you also see me as a father figure. You always have. You've always told me this. I walk onto our world stage as Ragnar. Ragnar is the personification of who I am historically. It is a name that was attached to me when I was about 10 years old. My brother called me it because of a movie that we saw that was about the Vikings, and I got more in tune with that than I did with his love of Romans and Greeks.
Yeah.
I had a division happen for he and I. Well, you go ahead with your guys. We conquered you. We already knew our history. We knew all this. My brother and I were very much in tune with everything that we.
And how many times has that played out throughout the course of history? Brothers going separate ways due to different beliefs and ended up making war against each other. How many times, how many countless civilizations have recorded that story?
Well, we have many of them. And everything that I have ever done as far as teaching the way of the heathen is to give us an understanding of where we came from. Why do I look at the world the way I look at it? Why do I have this perspective? How did I attain this perspective of looking at the world from 1,000 years ago? Well, it came to me naturally, innate. It's within me. It's who I am as a human being. I have this old perspective of the world. I've always been in tune with history. I've always had an older view of the world. It's just who I am. It's my personality. It came with me. Add to that a love of history and reading it and going deep and looking for many sources, all that were available to me. From a very young age, I became a scholar, very young age. Which brings me to the things that I have brought with me tonight. I have brought examples of where I came from. I have brought the books that brought me to where I am today, that gave me an understanding, an innate understanding of how people lived 1,000 years ago. Why it's important for us to see the world from that context, because it is normal and natural to us as a people.
Yes.
There's a reason why we're here tonight. There's a reason why we associate with each other. There's a reason why it's important to us to get this message out, that you have an option. Yeah. You have an option. You can see the world from 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, whatever your ancestral pole is. Yeah. Because this is about our ancestors. All that I have here displayed is of our ancestors. How people lived 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, all contained within these books. These books that were not written by the Old Norse, were not put down in the age of the Viking by the Vikings. Rather, it was put down by those people who were their enemies, people they preyed upon, people that looked at them as historical monsters. But in fact, they were human beings like the human beings they preyed upon, who also had their faults, who also are listed in history as being horrible human beings, but who writes the history?
So, but the majority of what we would call our core text would be the Havamal, the Icelandic Sagas, the Prose and Poetic Edda.
Yes.
The Voluspa is included in that. And a lot of these, along with a lot of the family histories as well, were written down for us by a Christian about 300 years too late. After it all happened, it was the first time that any of the stories to modern recollection that were actually recorded. So our stories are potentially tainted in some Christian manner, potentially because they were written down by a Christian monk at the time, Snorri Sturluson. But it is all we have to go by. It is all we have to go by. But what we'll do is we'll link descriptions and titles in the description below, so it makes sure everybody has an option to have a look and see what they are, and carry on from there. Again, this is just about putting it out there and letting you know where we come from and how we got here. And these books are, our historical reference.
Yeah. Sure.
So you mentioned a few. I am often asked, because I've been on this path as an active heathen in this world, on the world stage, in our community at least, how do I get started? What do I read? What do I look for? How can I become better educated?
Yeah.
How can I understand this concept of yours from the perspective that you have come to understand it? And I always advise people to come to it from two directions. First, mythology, the stories, from any child's book, from any picture book, from any of the sources you have online. There are thousands of examples of Norse mythology in print.
Yeah, in children's books
All of
alone.
the stories, children's books, all of them, and all of them are wonderful, and all of them tell a slightly different version of the very same story, but that's the way stories are told.
Right.
If you are a boring speaker, if you can only give out facts, people may or may not listen to you. They may want to listen to you only because you're giving facts, but most people will turn away unless it's entertaining. So if you're only giving facts and you don't put any flesh on the bones of the story, and if you don't give it more action and more adventure and a bigger stage, most people are going to get bored and turn away. It's about how you tell a story, whether or not people are going to remember it. Most of our stories were told in the form of poems. It's poetry. You can remember a lyric in a song better than you can the words written down and told to you about the song, because you just don't remember it in that way. It's not the way the human mind works. We remember songs. In the Poetic Edda, we have the oldest of our stories, our origin story. And that's contained in the story of the Voluspa, where Odin seeks out a Ceres, the vulva, and asks questions about what is to be, based on his concern for his son, Balder. And he is told that there was a beginning and there's going to be an end. And there is those things that are going to happen in between. Very much like our concept of the Norns, of weird, where we have the beginning, the present, and the future. How things began, what happened in between, and what's going to happen at the end. That's when we were told of our ending, which is we have our origin, beginning with Guningap, and the elemental of the Surtur, the land, the all-encompassing cold of Niflheim, and then the creation of the being Ymir, and how the sons of Buri and Bor slayed Ymir, and who was the primordial frost giant, the glacier, freed the land so that the land could come forth. And when the land came forth, they brought in the people. And this is in our origin story, how the creation of people came about. Well, put that in the context of natural phenomena and put it into the story of a people. How did we begun? How was this begun? How did this happen? Well, in our origin story, it simply tells that we lived in the land of glaciers. We lived in the land when cold was preeminent. And we also lived in a land where there were volcanoes and eruptions. There were fire was coming out of the earth. We lived in a land that it was harsh. It was difficult to live, difficult to survive. The trees were important to us. They were sustenance to us. But they're also fearful. We were afraid of the trees. We were afraid of the swamps. And this is in Germany. Now, take it north. Take it into the Scandinavian countries. All people's stories, all their mythologies, all their creation myths are based on environment. Where did you grow up?
Yeah.
What was your perception?
Yeah.
I remember when I was 6 years old, I went out in a frosty San Francisco winter morning, and we got enough snow off the top of a few cars to be able to make a few snowballs once in my entire life.
Hell yeah.
I remember as a kid we had these ice storms where you'd have this, this tree branch that's 1/4 of an inch thick, and it has 3/8 of an inch of ice just covering the whole thing. And these tall trees, massive trees, bending over under the force of the weight of the ice that is caked upon them. I have photographs of our driveway where these massive trees are just gaped over, just under the weight of the ice. And, you know.
So
here's a piece of perspective for you. Where I grew up, the two houses that I lived in growing up were not in a city. The first house was probably 15 minutes away from a city. It was 9 acres out in the middle of nowhere, away from the city, right?
Yeah.
That city was probably 25,000. Okay. When I get into high school, we move out to Felton. Now, I think Felton was in the neighborhood of 2,500.
Oh, dang.
And we lived 5 miles away from that. Okay. I was the first one on the school bus at 6:45 in the morning. And I was the last one off the school bus at almost 4:30 in the afternoon.
Dang. Long days.
Yeah. And before you got on the school bus, you best make sure you got up and fed the animals when it was your turn. Yeah. There are chores and responsibilities.
Well, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful segue. Again, we're talking about what it is to be heathen. Well, we've just given you examples of what it is to have a heathen life. First, be responsible. You, even as a child, 1,000 years ago, you lived on a farm. You had responsibilities.
Yeah.
Before you could go play, before you could do anything, you had responsibilities, and that's the way it should be. What you've just described is a heathen life. What I've just described is a heathen life. It's a way of being invested in the world, enjoying your moments in time, being in tune with nature, experiencing nature, being one with nature as far as your appreciation of it.
Yeah.
Your appreciation of being in the woods, your appreciation of being in a rugged terrain and doing things that are adventurous. That's a part of a heathen life that are described in some of our lore. We are very fortunate people. You had mentioned Snorri Sturluson. I have a perspective on him. I've read everything that he's written. Yes, he was a Christian, but he was a scholar. Mm-hmm. He was an Icelander. He was said to be descended from Egil Skallagrimsson. He was a proud man. He was a chieftain. He was a lawgiver. Mm-hmm, he was proud of his heritage. Yep. He was a man that, as a scholar, and he was brought up in a scholarly background. He was in Iceland, in Reykjavik. He was in the only university at that time that you could really describe as a university. Learned men. Regardless of what his background was, regardless of what his religious beliefs were, this was a man who was a scholar, who was proud of his heritage. Yeah. So even if not everything that we have in the Prose Edda, in the Heimskringla, what we have in the Icelandic Sagas, no matter what we have, if it has a taint to it, there's also a truth to it. And what we have as responsible heathens, what I recommend to all people who want to go onto this path or explore this path, first know the history of the people, because it's the most enjoyable part of it. It's what most people are attuned to, what most people appreciate in a scholarly aspect. Mm-hmm. This has been with me for many years. It is the best of the Age of the Vikings. It's by Gwyn Jones. This has it from the very origins of the Scandinavian people, from each of the now countries, and explains the differences in Norway because of the different districts, the way people looked at the world, that yes, Uller may have been preeminent, but Thor might have been in the very next district. Mm-hmm. So there's much to get in here.
We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back here in a few moments. I think we need to refill our horns. All right, welcome back. Just took a brief transition intermission, short break, and we're back. And we had a little bit more to drink, which is good because it opens the voices up a little bit. Yeah. All right.
Dry throat.
So moving on from the Vikings by...
excuse me, but this is an excellent mead.
Thank you.
Excellent mead. It's got
again, tonight's mead sponsored by me.
Yes.
A little something out of the refrigerator of my personal collection.
Yeah.
Delicious. But you'd have to be here drinking it with us to understand.
Personal stat.
sorry, not sorry. But moving on from the Vikings, book by Gwyn Jones, the Icelandic Sagas.
Yeah, the four series of books or information sources that I recommend to everyone who wants to explore the path of heathen, to get an understanding of who we are, where we come from, what our history is. Start with the history of the Vikings, and there's so many. There's so many books. This is mine, but I've read hundreds of history books about the Vikings, and there's a point to that, and I'll get back to it. This gives us the history of the people. Yeah. As we know historically, with archaeological evidence, with all the things that we have in science, which are updated constantly. This is a wonderful tomb, but you get something that's more current, and everything that you have on the internet, we're getting information every day about our history. So it's deep, it's rich, it's true, it's there, and it tells us of a people, how we became who we are, and why we see the world from the perspective that we see it. Then we have the Icelandic Sagas. This is so rare in the history of a people that you have the stories of families, how they lived their lives on a daily basis, how they saw the world, what honor meant to them, what killing meant to them, what farming meant to them, what adventure meant to them from their perspective. Yeah. Written 200 years ago, but recordings of a memory, a sing-song, a poetry of a people, as was later put down in writing. But no one made these up. Yeah. Now, were they enhanced? Possibly, but there's so much history contained in the Icelandic sagas that's verifiable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's told, in some cases, the only stories we have are from the Icelandic sagas, giving you a depth of the history that we know of.
Right.
Because everything else is basically in chronicles. And chronicles only kill you the highlight of what happened, not the in-depth story of what's behind it.
So the Icelandic Sagas is definitely a more daily life, in-depth
absolutely
story.
A wonderful treasure for us as a people. So, history of the folk, history of the families, then the history of the gods. Now again, we're fortunate in that it was copied down, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda.
Yeah.
Now, to put this in the context of what those of the Abrahamic religions would look at, this is our Old and New Testament to a degree.
Yeah.
What it is our mythologies. It's the stories of our gods. It tells us how we were created, where we came from the perspective of a people that lived in the northern climes of our world, that lived above a certain latitude, that dealt with a certain way of life, was introduced to this world as a people in the harshest of environments that we know as human beings.
Yeah, and parts of that land was where the sun never set.
Absolutely. It's unique. They have the giant stance, the aurora borealis, that it was... Who isn't mystified by that to this day, just to stand in its presence? So we have a perspective of the world that brought forth these gods, these goddesses, and they absolutely 100% represent our story of chaos and balance. We get it from our histories of how the people lived their lives and the events that they brought forth. Their chaos brought forth new land and settlement for the people. What they brought forth into the world in the form of their raids and the pillaging and what we know as the Vikings brought forth an opportunity for a people that were overpopulated, living in a land that just would not produce a larger population consistently in a healthy way, brought them to the opportunity to go somewhere else and take over land that had been taken by other people from other people. So to say that we did something horrible, well, get back into your history and learn the truth. But the Vikings are a people that were created from a time and place. Yeah. And their way of looking at the world, the heathen viewpoint, is based on where they came from. So, the history of our gods, then we have our hero histories. Now, we are very familiar with the stories of heroes. We have many examples of heroes. Heroes give us examples of how to live a life. The best of us as men and women gives us the best of who we could be. Our gods give us examples of how the world was created, how man was created, how to live your life. It gives you words of wisdom, and we'll get to that in a moment. But it gives you examples of what created us and why we were created and our place in this world for those people who who have a spiritual viewpoint. Well, this happens to be our spiritual viewpoint. You have your stories, and we want you to enjoy those stories. I want you to tell me about your stories. I want you, as someone who doesn't share my culture, to tell me about your culture, your history, your mythologies. I want to know because I'm a curious man. Mm-hmm. But I have my own. This is my ancestor story. These are the individuals that they admired. And these stories were told and passed down to us. Some of them we're familiar with today because they have inspired people to do more. Yeah. Our God stories have inspired people to do more and to be better and to understand the world better. Our histories give us examples of how to live a life, tell us what we did, how we did it, why we did it in some cases. But the hero sagas tell us to be the best that we can be.
I see Beowulf among them.
Yes, and Beowulf's well known. Now, it's attributed to the Saxons, to the English, but it's a story of Danes and Gits. And these are heroes. These are great warriors who consider themselves to be superior to all other races. If you were a Saxon, they were superior to you. You were an inferior race to them. And they looked at it that way. But amongst themselves, it was tribe to tribe, family to family. If you had the stronger family, then you were probably ruling a larger land. And then you gathered people to live around you. You had responsibilities. Part of being a good heathen is to live a responsible life, to take care of your responsibilities. We say, amongst the heathen folk, that the first thing that we will do to bring you forward is to put you in a position to support yourself, to have a trade, a job, a talent, something that will support you. Be honorable as best you can. Be truthful as best you can. Show courage as best you can. These are the three principles that guide being a heathen. These three alone. Everything else follows that. But if you have those three, then you're probably an honorable man, a good man, somebody I can rely on. Same thing applies to a woman. These stories give us examples of that. Now, they're not perfect. We're not perfect. No. We don't do everything in a perfect manner. We're not subject to the whims of gods that say you did this right, you did this wrong. We're subject to each other. Yeah. We're held accountable by each other. And the fact that these names are recorded and remembered, Beowulf, Sigurd, Hrafkraki, Bachbarvjaki. These are great heroes amongst our people. Amongst our people. Yeah. These are examples of how to live a good life, how to do heroic things, whether we're heroes or not. Because contained within these stories are those who are not heroic, but they do heroic things. Yeah. And this is inspiring. This is what we want. We recommend that you read these. They'll inspire you.
They're great stories.
They'll open things for you. They'll give you a gateway into who we are. But then we have specifics. This is a treasure amongst any folk. This is the Havamal.
The Havamal.
These are the words of wisdom of Odin, our All-Father, the All-Wise, the leader of our people. I have a drinking horn that is dedicated to him. It has half of his given names. Odin traveled wisely. He traveled far. He always made an impression. He always left a gift behind as he gained gifts in wisdom and experience. He's known by many names. Odin is one of them. And through him we gain these words of wisdom. Now, do they apply to this world today? Absolutely they do.
Yes.
We have had discussions about this book and what is contained within it for many years, and it's a great opportunity for a discussion. It's a great opportunity to gather people together to just discuss one stanza.
Yeah.
One set of wisdom, which was acquired by us, human beings, that lived 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. It applies to today in every way, shape, and form. Even the wise can be blinded by love. Well, who doesn't know that now?
Yeah.
These fill in gaps to be a heathen. Can everyone go through this process and acquire this knowledge? No, not everyone is capable of learning in that way. That's why there are folk like us. We want to bring what we know along with those others that are out there doing it, and we appreciate everything that you've done thus far. You've opened up the worldview of who we are as heathen folk. Whether you practice the path of the religion, whether you live the life of a heathen and think of yourself as a heathen, the information that has been given away, the gift of knowledge is wonderful. And we appreciate every bit that everyone has done. What we're doing is something that we did publicly, privately, in group settings for at least 15 years now, as far as what we're doing tonight.
Yeah.
The sharing of information, knowledge, wisdom, but the opportunity to teach, to share, to gain in return, the vision of the growth of the individuals, to see them become more, to go to that next level of taking on responsibility of family, to be responsible to someone more than just yourself, part of the heathen path, and then ultimately to become responsible, as we are tonight, to our community, to share what we are, who we are, what we've done with more than just those that are local in the Roanoke Valley.
Any choice that you make to study something, you have to put in the time, you have to pick up the books, you have to take the time to learn the material. And what we have is a collection of stories. It's no different than the Christian faith in the fact that they have the Bible, which is a collection of stories, and there's a collection of stories in the Christian faith that goes beyond and surpasses the Bible, and they have, it's very, what we have is similar to.
Absolutely.
What we have is a collection of stories, and it's one of those things that I have been told by many people that I have met across the years, that it is a religion, it is a path of study, it comes with homework. You have to put in the time to sit down and educate yourself. We can give you the material, we can tell you where to find it, but if you don't put in the due diligence to sit down and take the time and educate yourself on the collection of stories, then you miss the best part about, this path that we walk.
Because it's a beautiful story of a people. It's the true story of a people. Now, we're a people that have been vilified. We've been turned into monsters, and we've been turned into pillagers and rapists and brutal human beings. And if you know the history of Europe, if you know the history of humankind, regardless of the continent in which they lived, you'll know that brutality and rape and pillaging went on with every culture, with every people.
More common than you think.
The Vikings, taking away the Vikings, which is an activity, not a name, it's not even a definition that was used by the people of that time period. To go a Viking was an activity. It was go on an adventure. It didn't necessarily have to be pillaging, but more often than not it was, which is pillaging is a way to acquire wealth. You could take it in tithes, you can take it in tribute, you can take it in many different forms, but it is taken by the strong from the weak, and that's just the way it is. Those people of that time period were primarily farmers. They were primarily fishermen, merchants. They were people that traveled, people that gathered information, material, brought back the news of the world to the people that were at the very furthest northern portion of the world.
Yeah.
Isolated to a degree, but involved with world events forever. The Bronze Age of the Nordic people was a wonderful time, very artistic, wonderful works that we have found with them. The concept that we were barbarians is ridiculous. It was a rich culture. Wonderful cloth was woven. It was a magic with women to be the weavers of cloth, to be the weavers of that which you wore upon your body. It kept you warm and secure and safe, or looking wonderful in gatherings.
It was also a necessary skill.
Absolutely necessary, and is never, ever, ever was it looked at as a demeaning chore. Mm-mm. The best of ladies, the best of ladies, the queen of the gods, Frigg, was a weaver. This concept that the Vikings were nothing but pillagers and rapists and murderers, they had good reason to be. Part of the heathen way is to support and hold each other accountable. The advent of the Viking Age came about as righteous retribution for what was being imposed upon the heathen people of Europe at that time by Charlemagne and the Franks, the father that preceded him, Charles Martel. There are wars against the heathen folk, against the Saxon people, the people of Germany, that refused to convert to Christianity. Now, it's all about power. imposing your will upon a people, but there were brutal atrocities committed against the heathen folk. Is it ridiculous to suppose that the people that lived in the Scandinavian countries were not aware of these atrocities? That they didn't mingle with these people, that they weren't interrelated with them in marriage, certainly traded with them, that whole tribal units moved from Scandinavia to Germany and back again? We have lots of historical evidence of that.
News travel.
So to think that this was just some random opportunity to pillage a monastery that just so happened to be the most sacred monastery of Europe,
we got lucky.
certainly of England, to think that that was some random act, that they didn't know exactly what they were doing, is to diminish the intelligence of these people who, 400 years before, had taken down the mighty Roman Empire and pushed them out of their borders.
Yeah.
And several centuries before that had decimated the legions of Rome at their peak. So to say that these were ignorant savages is just a little off base.
Yeah.
So the heathen man and woman takes strength from that history. We appreciate it, but we're not those people.
No, we're not.
Now we have an issue in what we call the heathen realm today with people that have taken license with who and what we are as heathen men and women. Mm-hmm. Now I've said that we are people that take responsibility for self, that you must be able to take care of yourself, support yourself, take on responsibility for family, then be involved with and for, be responsible to and for community. Well, when you're doing that, you're being held accountable. When you put yourself out there, you're putting yourself accountable. Heathen folk will hold you accountable. Everyone who's a heathen has a right to all of the symbols of being a heathen. If you want to wear the hammer, you wear the hammer. If you want to tattoo yourself with any of the symbols that represent heathenry, you have the right to do that. I don't have the right to tell you you're not heathen. Anyone can be heathen if they say they're heathen. You'll prove it with your deeds. But to say that people don't have a right to claim the gods will claim their own. We say that we're called to the gods, called to them. It's a feeling, it's a vibration. It's not something you hear with your ears. You feel it with the essence of who you are. Your Megan, your essence, your power. You feel it. It resonates within you.
Yeah.
To say that because of the color of someone's skin, the continent of their origin, their background, to say that they can't be heathen, to say that they don't have a right to this path, well, that's a foolish, ridiculous thing to say. Foolish and ridiculous thing to say.
Right.
However, we have found that those people who share the common ancestry of what's represented in these tombs, more often than not, will be more dedicated to the process of continuance as a heathen. Most get into it because it's a curious thing. It's something they admire, they respect, and it sings to them. It's a truth to them. But it's not of them.
Right.
It's not of their ancestry. But color of your skin doesn't say that. I know people who have a dark skin that have 26% Norwegian in their background. I don't. So color of skin means
because you're from
nothing.
the West Coast, that's why you don't.
If the gods call you, we say this.
Yeah.
If your ancestors call you, because our gods are our ancestors, if you're being called to them and you answer the call and you live the life, then you're a heathen.
It's not my place to say whether you are or are not heathen.
Yes.
It's not my place. It's your place.
What kind of heathen?
Yeah.
Just like if you were a Christian, what kind of Christian?
Yeah.
Just like if you're a Muslim, what kind of Muslim? Just like if you're whatever you might be.
Right. What kind?
What kind of man or woman you are will determine whether or not you're going to be a part of my life or how you're going to be in my life. Because I don't mind enemies. So we can be enemies. That's okay too. I'd just as soon have an enemy as a new friend. I have millions of friends. Maybe not millions, but
you need a good enemy.
Sufficient amount. I've only got a couple of enemies. So I don't mind having another enemy. However, the path I'm on now is to share who and what I am with my brothers and sisters and those closest to me. So whatever I have, whatever my gift is, and we've been very fortunate in our life to have great gift givers, those who absolutely represent and emulate that which we call heathen. My gift is to share who and what I am, having gained it. Once I gained it, then it was my responsibility to give it away. Yeah. And in the process, share our life, share an existence, share moments in time. Everything that we've done that was in the Vikings of the Valley and in all of the bonfires, all of the gatherings of the folk and events, all of the educational programs was to gather heathen folk, was to put all of this on display to the wider public in the way that was available to us at that time. This is a new venture. This is a new opportunity. It fits us because we're doing exactly right now in front of a video camera what we do anyway in our private time.
Yeah.
We have had educational programs where rooms were filled. We've had, I've done seminars and lectures before hundreds of people. All of it was based on my opportunity to share that which is my gift, what was gifted to me, to become a heathen man, or be aware that I'm a heathen man, and to let other people know that we are here, we are welcoming, we will help you on the path. This is what's most important to us, and this is why the locking horn, the concept of the locking horn, when I first stepped onto the path, I was gifted a horn. It wasn't this horn, but I was gifted this horn. This is a twin of a horn that my brother Ty has. It doesn't look the same, but it's the same shape. You put them down, it's exactly the same horn.
Yeah.
But by a young group of heathens that were very dedicated to who and what they were. And it surprised me to even find them in this part of the country, because I live in the Bible Belt. I live in Virginia, North Carolina, or near North Carolina, or out of North Carolina, I should say. So, it surprised me to find them, but they gifted me a horn. And that horn was the first horn that was introduced into the Roanoke Valley from a Viking me. So this is a welcoming concept. This is a sharing concept. Typically when we're in ritual, when we're bloat, we're in sumble, we're passing horns around. We have horns that are large enough to go the length of this table.
Half the length of the table, but nonetheless, yes.
That'd be one hell of a horn, bro.
Again, it's Jeff. It's wonderful to have you in my home.
I appreciate it.
Ty, again, you're always welcome in my home, brothers.
Thank you, bro. It's a pleasure being here.
Glad to have you. Glad you were here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yes.
We'll be putting out as much more content as we possibly can, as soon as we can. It's all in the major grains of the future that is yet to come. Join us. Vaseos.
Vaseos.